Welcome to our midweek edition of Asia Business Report. I'm Sharon Jutlail in Singapore. Asia-Pacific nations are urging the European Union to make more cuts in agricultural subsidies. The message came just days ahead of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in South Korea later this week. The controversial issue will also dominate the agenda at the World Trade Organization meeting in Hong Kong next month. However, India's Commerce and Industry Minister says failure to secure a global trade deal at the meeting in Hong Kong will not make or break the Doha round of trade talks. Most developing nations refuse to sign onto a trade liberalization agreement unless developed nations, particularly Europe, reduce support for their agricultural sector. Well, for more, we have Simon Littlewood in our studio. He's the president of Asia Now to talk about the topic. Now, APAC's been quite vocal about more agricultural access from the EU. They have the EU, of course, have backed down in the last few weeks. They said they're willing to cut tariffs by about 38%, but that's not quite enough, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, I think there's a certain irony in the way that they're throwing rocks at Europe. I mean, APEC is not supposed to be about negotiating trade agreements with Europe. It's supposed to be about liberalising trade within the Pacific Rim. It's egregiously failed to do that, so now its focus is mainly external. Obviously, there's a interesting and ironic parallel between what's going on in APEC, or rather what should be going on and isn't, and what's happening in Europe, which is that the process of deregulation is essentially held up by 2 or 3 holdouts. In the case of Asia, by Japan and South Korea, who heavily subsidise their agricultural sector. In the case of Europe, primarily France, but also a couple of other nations.
It's a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black.
I say it's very much of the pot calling the kettle black.
And Japan particularly very strong on their rice subsidies, aren't they?
Well, they are, and of course Japan, there's a special issue with Japan, which is that Koizumi has to stand down in less than a year, so his negotiating power is virtually nil, so don't expect to see any major initiatives from Japan.
Now, the speculation, obviously, that these talks really are just going to be a precursor to the WTO talks next month in Hong Kong. What are you anticipating from those talks? Because a lot of people speculating there's going to be gridlock. Well,
not much. I mean, the last 2 rounds, most recently the Doha round, have been far from successful. Really, there's about a year and a half left for this process to work because the presidential authority to negotiate expires in 2007. The issue is that there is total failure to agree on reductions in agricultural subsidies. The general view is that the 38% being offered by Europe is not enough. I mean, the 38%, it's not really 38%. I mean, that's the issue, because France has negotiated so many exceptions to that really it's a pretty meaningless number. The US has demanded 45%. If I look at the political background to this, you have a very beleaguered French government at the moment. I think that the last thing that Chirac and de Villepin are going to want to do is make further concessions on farm subsidies, because they are in serious strife.
So will the deadline be met for the Doha round of talks? It's supposed to be mid-2007 now, isn't it?
Well, I'm an optimist, as you know, Sharon, by nature. I hope it will, but it's going to require very significant movement. I don't see that, because I don't see the political latitude for the major players to actually make the necessary movement between now and then.
Now, looking at APEC again this week, I mean, are you expecting any kind of statement to be released by the leaders? I mean, is it a chance just to talk shop, or, for the leaders to wear colourful shirts?
Well, we know of course the shirts are a good tradition. Why don't you do shirts, actually? No, the shirts are great, but the reality is that we already know what they're going to do. They're going to announce that it's all that Europe aren't doing their stuff, and that and that there should be major concessions from Europe. So they're going to turn it into an external focus, which is not really what it should be about. Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Simon Littlewood from Asia.
You're welcome.
And that wraps up this edition of Asia Business Report. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback or comments about anything you've seen on the programme, particularly our Korean series this week, please do email us at asiabiz@bbc.co.uk. I'm Sharon Jutlail in Singapore. Thanks for joining us.